Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. The global warming scam is a three-headed dragon, with the three heads being politicians, journalists, and scientists. In this video, I discuss the role of how journalists corrupt the discussion about climate. This is a new article in The Atlantic, which follows the very standard Orwellian techniques which global warming journalists use to deceive the public. In George Orwell's novel 1984, the Ministry of Truth existed to rewrite the past in order to meet the needs of politicians. And that's exactly what this article is attempting to do. The title of this article is, Did Global Warming Really Pause During the 2000s? A new study explains why the controversial hiatus doesn't amount to much. They're attempting to rewrite history which was well established in the scientific literature. 4 years ago, the BBC reported that the global warming pause, which the Atlantic author is attempting to erase now, was central to the IPCC climate report. So fast forward 4 years to 2017, and Robinson Meyer of The Atlantic is attempting to erase the global warming pause, which was central to the IPCC report 4 years earlier. So now let's look at some of the tricks which the author is using to manipulate the readers. These are very typical tricks and found in almost all climate reporting. Now notice here it says a new study. The implication of saying that is that all the old studies were bad and a new study is somehow better. The huge photograph at the top of this article is a very standard psychological trick used by journalists attempting to defraud the public. It shows a very hot fire and makes the reader think of global warming, as if we didn't have big hot fires before global warming. So let's look at some actual data to see if forest fires have increased as carbon dioxide has increased. This is a January 2001 report from all of the key government agencies who are experts on forest fires. And what the data shows us is the exact opposite of what the Atlantic author wants you to believe. Historically, fire has been a frequent and major ecological factor in North America. In the conterminous United States during the pre-industrial period, when CO2 was only 280 parts per million, an average of 145 million acres burned annually. Today, only 14 million acres are burned annually. So forest fires are down 90% as CO2 has increased. So now let's look at the next trick being used by the Atlantic journalist. It says, global warming does not obsess most Americans, but it frightens the scientists who studied it. The language being used by the author carries the implication that all scientists think as one. It frightens the scientists who study it. Who are these scientists? And what study has ever shown that scientists are frightened? If scientists are frightened of anything, it's having their funding cut off. If they don't keep the global warming scam going, they're not going to get any money in, and then they're in big trouble. And the reason that global warming does not obsess most Americans is because they don't see any evidence of it, and all of the ridiculous predictions being made by the scientists trying to frighten them have failed in the past. The global warming pause was very real, and it's ongoing. This graph here shows in red and blue satellite temperatures measured in the troposphere. Show that basically there's been very little warming since the year 2000, and the recent warming was just due to an El Nino spike, which has since fallen back to its previous levels. But if we look at the NASA temperatures, it's going up and up and up. What they've done is they've altered their data because they wanted to get rid of the global warming pause so that journalists like the one at The Atlantic could write fake news stories about it. The fake scientists behind the global warming scam depend very heavily on fake journalists like Robinson Meyer at The Atlantic. And their goal is to get politicians to give them money to keep the scam alive. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.